The last thesis. Christian claims about the person of Jesus are not true. His alleged miracles violate the laws of nature. I'm going to read two excerpts, Professor Dawkins. The first comes from page 92 of your book. The historical evidence that Jesus claimed any sort of divine status is minimal. The next comes from page 257. Jesus was a devotee of the same in-group morality coupled with out-group hostility that was taken for granted in the Old Testament. Jesus was a loyal Jew. It was Paul who invented the idea of taking the Jewish God to the Gentiles. Hartung puts it more bluntly than I dare. Jesus would have turned over in his grave if he had known that Paul would be taking his plan to the pigs.
Once again, I can't let pass that rhetoric of mine about blind physical forces and indifference and nature neither cares, DNA neither cares nor knows. Maybe you're right that portrays a hideous world. Well, maybe the world is a hideous world. Doesn't make it not true. No. That's the fundamental point that I would wish to leave with you, that you can talk till you're blue in the face about how it would be nice if such and such were true. It would be nice if the world were friendly to us. It would be nice if the world was not such a hideous one. But I see it as, first, it tells you nothing about whether it's true or not. We have to decide whether it's true or not separately. It gives us, if it is a hideous world, it gives us something to rise above. And we clearly do rise above it. You raised the question, how do we rebel? And you seem to think there was some kind of contradiction. There is no contradiction with rising above Darwinian dictates. We do it every time we use a contraceptive. It's easy. Every time you use a contraceptive, you are defying the Darwinian imperative to reproduce. You're enjoying sex using the Darwinian, the pleasure that was built into you, into your brains by Darwinism, because normally sex leads to reproduction. You're cutting off that link, and you're using sex for pure enjoyment without reproduction. That's defying, that's rebelling against the selfish genes. And we can do a grand job of rebelling against the hideous, blind physical forces that put us here. We understand what put us here. We understand that we are here as a result of a truly hideous process. Never mind about the effects on humanity. Natural selection, the process which guides evolution, the process whereby...
I'm going to cut you off.
Sorry?
I'm going to have to cut you off.
Okay. Natural selection is an ugly process that has beautiful consequences. We humans can rise above it. That's only 2.5 minutes.
Okay. Well, our time has been used a lot by the free exchange.
I appreciate it. I appreciate it.
If you would like to take 30 seconds to wrap up, please.
Well, what about the final wrap-up that we're going to do?
We will do that, and that's our best opportunity if it's still left. Dr. Lennox.
Which question do you want me to refer to?
Well, it's your choice, I guess.
Well, I think I'd like to make a comment on what Richard just said, because I think you are talking about two different things. My point was this, that if you believe that the universe is at bottom, there's no good and evil, you remove from yourself the categories you're using to discuss morality. That's my point. You're assuming it's true. I'm arguing on the basis of its truth that you're removing those categories, and therefore you leave yourself powerless to comment.
Right. You make a good point that I've removed any absolute standard of morality. The empirical fact, however, is that we all very largely share what we regard as morality. And that's a very interesting
goes
fact.
much further than that. If that's what you meant, you should have written.
Well, I kind of
there's
did.
no good or evil is a very strong absolutist statement, I would have thought.
How about...
But I want to refer to this.
How about the topic?
Let me say something about this thesis about the person of Jesus and so on. Again, I have concerns about the God delusion in its treatment of the authority and reliability of Scripture. Because those who've studied it in detail, and I see reference to very few scholars in his book, have come to the conclusion that, say, for example, the historian Luke is one of the most authoritative historians of all ancient history. And Sherwin White of Oxford, a Roman historian, says that it would be absurd to suggest that that Luke's basic historicity was false, even in matters of detail. And I'm concerned too, not only about your attitude to history, Richard, but your description of Jesus as belonging to a person who practiced an in-group morality and out-group hostility, and your interpretation of love your neighbor, which I note doesn't come from a theologian, but from an anesthesiologist. And I think he just might have put you to sleep a little bit as you read it, because in Leviticus, which quotes love your neighbors yourself, just a bit further down, it says, when a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall not do him wrong. You shall treat the stranger who lives with you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, because you were strangers in Egypt. So in point of historicity, you are totally wrong about the attitude of Jesus. In fact, I would have thought you'd have been very familiar with the parable of the Good Samaritan. And in that parable, it was a Samaritan, one of the strangers, that showed mercy. And that was precisely the parable that Jesus taught to illustrate the love your neighbor as yourself of Leviticus. Now, a mistake like that seems to me to be very serious indeed. I mean, I react to it a bit like this. What would you think if I got all my views on Darwin from an engineer and never bothered to read The Origin of Species? I think you would be distressed by that. But finally, a word about miracles. This is a massive subject. You claim with David Hume that miracles violate the laws of nature. Well, David Hume's a very curious person to quote on this topic, because David Hume didn't believe really in the laws of cause and effect on which laws of nature are founded. He didn't believe in causality, and he didn't appear to believe in the principle of induction. And so that he's not a very good authority to quote. Secondly, I do not think that miracles are violations of the laws of nature, because the laws of nature describe what normally happens. God, who is the God of this universe and created it with its regularities, is perfectly at liberty to feed a new event into the universe. Just as C.S. Lewis makes a point, if I put $2 plus $2 in my desk tonight, $4. If I find in the morning is $1, I don't say that the laws of arithmetic have been broken. I say the laws of Alabama have been broken. And I call for a federal judge.
Well, the federal judge is going to ask that you continue your remarks with the understanding that you really are needing to conclude them within the next couple of minutes to give Professor Dawkins the last word. There is a broadcast audience. That is part of the reason for our time limits.
Were those meant to be my concluding remarks?
No, I'm giving you an extra minute or so
to make my concluding
to make
remarks.
your concluding remark.
My final conclusion for the night.
Before giving the last word to Professor Dawkins.
Okay.